the case, today, what I'd like to do for us is, if you read the email, is I want to spend a few minutes before we go into the last thoughts about questions in the Torah and what it is that we can gain from them. And I want to do a little bit of reflection from all of us here. What are the questions that we studied so far that really kind of touched you, really affected you, really gave you pause and allowed you to think differently? Hopefully there was one. And if there isn't one, that's fine. You can just, enjoy what other people share. But I have a feeling that we all saw questions that maybe kind of caught us by surprise, that our tradition would be so audacious to pose the question, recorded in this book, but also that the proposition of the question gives us permission to ask those kinds of questions about our world on our own. We walk the world thinking that faith or that like belief is something absolute and we have to achieve it. That belief is something that already exists and we're just trying to figure it out on our own. But the questions give us permission to say that belief is a journey that we take along the way, and it's through the questions that help us get to that place. So let's start with that. Anybody have a question that like really got them? Sharon.
I will say that Passover learning class, to me, the question, it's not really like, but what would you want to be liberated from, was the most thought-provoking, brought up the most conversation. Everybody came in contact with in New Orleans and my family, and to me that was just so
wonderful, right? Great. Asking a question really brings people into your area. Roberta S., I'm like totally thinking of you at this question. And when I get to the conclusion of this, when you say that your family is like, Mom, our grandma, stop asking so many questions. And you're like, but I ask questions because I love you, right? Right? Like there is something so powerful about that. And you should not stop asking questions, but also like you should give them, now hopefully now you have permission to say like, my questions are, they were given by God, and then see how that goes. Yeah. Did you have something to say, Roberta?
Well, I was out with my grandson last night and I am called the Great Inquisitor.
Oh, wow. I think that's a compliment.
I think so. I think you should be a talk show host.
Phil
Thank
Donahue.
you, Judy.
Yeah. Any other
That's better than the great Yenta.
Yeah.
Not a question.
Any other? No. Write your question down. I want you to share the questions of what you want, because I don't want to. I want to stay on topic for this. Write it down. Write the question down.
It's not a question. I just wanted to say that I learned the power of questions through all these other questions, and I'm too chupchik to think of one in particular, but they've all been really meaningful.
Wow, you just get an A+. Did you see what she just did? Did you hear what she just used? Chupchik, right? She just used chupchik in a sentence, and it was close. So that was great. No, that's good. So the very concept that questions have power in them is something that was eye-opening. And I guess the journey for you was, here are some examples of how powerful they can be. Nice.
And also, when you can't ask them and you're not allowed to, how awful that is.
That's great.
freedom to ask.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah, Lori, and then Jay.
To further that, how a question has power, how the tone of your question, will lead to how the person responds to you, to create that partnership of two people together versus being, making it commanding.
That's right. Right. Instead of it being pedantic, right? I say, and you obey, or you respond. It is the sort of relational aspect of a question that is also powerful, and something that we don't readily pay attention to because we're just asking questions all along the way, right? We're doing it. We know that it's necessary, but when we stop and reflect on what is its necessity, it really changes the impact of our questions. The better questions that we ask, the better outcome.
Well said, Rabbi Josh.
Jay?
Yes, I think it's apropos that that a course about questions started our last class with you asking us questions about this whole class. So I think that's kind of interesting. And also I have a question about, are angry questions holy also?
What is an angry question?
Well, I mean, this has been asked by at least 6 million people and many, many more, you know, like how can the Holocaust happen? How can we explain if there's a God that intervenes from time to time? How could, you know, so there were certain angry questions that we could ask. So is that still holy? I mean, if we're doubting God and angry at God about, so how can kids get killed in a school? I mean, these are questions that, you know, I'm not the only one who's asking, but they're coming from a place from anger. So are those still holy?
Well, that is a really great, I think it's important to frame exactly what is the purpose of that question. So when somebody says, how can good God let 6 million of God's chosen people perish in the camps? Like, where was God? Something like that, which is 2 questions, right? And you would say behind it, the thrust of it isn't really a desire for an answer, but is merely an expression of anger. So is it really a question if it's really an expression of anger? And that's a very important distinction that we have to clarify, is whether or not the questions that we ask are indeed ones that we want answers from. So we talked about rhetorical questions, right? Ones in which you have the answer already, but you ask the question to kind of evoke a deeper set of understandings. What?
To clarify.
It's either a clarification, or it's the other way to say, I'm expressing to you my feelings of anger and disappointment, and I'm doing it in the form of a question to make you think that I want you to answer it. But what I really want you to feel is that I'm angry.
But
right, Jay?
But what if you do want it?
Is that holy?
No, yeah. What if you truly want an answer? If God, from time to, if we believe that he made the C part, why, you know, why do these things happen? People do want to know.
I think that's really great, and probably why there isn't any one answer, because people are still asking those questions, Pam, right? Every time people are asking those questions is because maybe those aren't the questions that require answers. That's maybe another piece. What are questions that don't require answers? Now that's only in response to the last thing that you said, Jay. The first thing that you're grappling with is that if you ask a question of where was God, where was the God who allowed human beings to slaughter each other to the tune of 6 million, where was that God? If that God exists in other places in the Bible where it says that it's a redemptive God. And the reason that question is still being asked is because, and this is probably uncomfortable, because that's not the right question. That's the problem. The problem is we think that we're asking the right question, which is, where was God in the place? But you already know the answer. You already know the answer. And if you don't, then you should do some research, because you know that God wasn't there. You know that God wasn't there, but you're mad that God wasn't there. And then you say, well, where was God? And then you can do what a lot of people do, what the theologians do. I see you, Suzanne. But then you do what the theologians do, which is they build back into, well, if God wasn't there, where was God? So then you have, like my teacher, Rabbi Shuais, you have it in the righteous Gentiles. You have it in the people who put their lives at risk to save Jews. Now you would say, wait a minute, why didn't they save 6 million? Because they saved as many as they possibly could. And that's why there's a whole walkway dedicated to those people in Yad Vashem. And would you ask the follow-up question to say, well, isn't that wasn't enough? That's another conversation. What defines enough? Do you understand? Right? And I suppose that we would want that answer. If there was a standard of enough, and basically the standard of enough in this conversation is nobody gets hurt, nobody dies, no pain exists, no problems ever trouble us. And yet that has never been the case, and it never will be the case. Our humanity isn't hinged upon a level of perfection that we're meant to attain. That's why the questions are in the book, because right from the very beginning, there's no such thing as perfection. The only thing that's perfect, if you will, is this God concept, which is all about a process of becoming. It's about evolving. It's about discovering. It's about interest, which I'll get back to in a moment. Suzanne.
My question is, how do you define God? Because the God I believe in doesn't intervene. The God I believe in is not the puppet master God. The God I believe in, I'll say it, was created us and walked away. And
Yeah,
left
right.
us.
So
and
right.
a number of times in Torah and in Talmud, we hear God say, "It's yours." You know, the ovens of Achmed, right?
Wait, what was that last thing?
The ovens of Achmed, is that what they are?
No, I don't know what you're talking about.
That was people were pushing a wall down and push it, and somebody asked the God to know.
The oven of Achnai.
Okay.
Achnai, right? Where they say God wasn't in the heavens, right? Yeah, that's a really great conversation. Yes, right. Like there are many definitions of God. So part of the problem for those who are saying where was God in the Holocaust would say, well, yeah, if you're looking for the God that redeemed a bunch of people from slavery in Egypt, it's going to be very disappointing for you to like discover that. However, does that fit? Let's hope so. Thank you. All right. We just had to plug in so that we don't run. Yeah, it looks like it. I hope so. So anyway, so like I feel like that's a whole class. I hope I addressed it for the moment. Okay. Did anybody else on the screen have a comment about what we're talking about so far? How about questions? Which question really got you? Which question was really, satisfying and evocative and inspiring? Anybody else want to add? I hope that means that Alice, go ahead.
I think I'm not quoting exactly, but there was the question about, is God in this place? And that really struck me about where God is in our world. And I have come to believe that there's a little bit of God in each of us, and that God gave us the responsibility to care for the world that God created. I hate to say he or she, that God created. And so the answer to the question, is God in this place? For me, is God is in each of us.
Right. So the question was Joseph to his brothers, for example. There's a couple of examples of it, but Joseph says to his brothers after they fling themselves down on his feet and they say, we're prepared to be your slaves, he says, can I take the place of God? Right? I'm not God. Right? So as long as you realize that you're not God, then you say, well, where is God? And then you could say, well, it's wherever you let God in, according to one of the Hasidic masters, right? And thank you, Alice. So that is an affirmation of what you have always maintained as your own kind of like personal theology. Nice. Any other contributions? So so keep thinking, right? I mean, I really hope that you maybe go back through your notes. And if there's a question that you're like, wow, this is a really, I want to keep studying this question because I think it's one that is perpetually asked. Sometimes we think that questions are, when they're meant for clarification, it's just about information. We're just trying to discover what is the answer to the question so that we can move on to the next step. But then there are questions that are constantly being asked. There are questions that are constantly posed, and those are ones that aren't looking for a specific answer per se, but they're looking for an invitation to create deeper connection. It's an opportunity to develop a deeper connection. I'd like to call that interest. When you take an interest in something or someone, you could use curiosity, but curiosity has kind of I don't know, sometimes we use curiosity too readily, but interest says, curiosity is like, tell me about this thing that I don't know about, but I don't necessarily have to have a connection to it, right? I just want to know what it is. But if I have an interest in it, what I want to know on the other side, that's going to prompt me to ask the best possible question so that I can continue to learn it. And when you have the best possible question, when the answer is engaging, right, Sherry? Right? Like when you ask a good question, it's almost limitless about what's happening. Like there's excitement about the shared discovery. So I think about relationships that you have, really deep, meaningful relationships. The best times that you have those relationships is when you stop asking questions with them, right? I mean, like, isn't that the best thing? We talk like we'll talk about the couples who like understand how to be in each other's presence without asking questions, right? Like you just know each other. And yet that isn't the conclusion. That's a moment in which you feel secure. But real relationship is about having the desire to ask questions, to know more, to want to know more. So when you are in relationships with people that you care about, the interest that there is something more to learn from them is what prompts you to ask good questions. How tragic it is when you have relationships, when you feel like you've known everything that there is to be known, or even worse, that there isn't a question to be asked because you don't want to know the answer. You're not being given permission to get the answer because defenses are up in the way, or because you are minimized and you are ridiculed for having a desire to know something that the other isn't comfortable sharing with you. But powerful relationships are the ones when interest prompts the ongoing question. That's you, Roberta. Right?
Yep.
That's you, the great inquisitor.
Yes, and sometimes you're afraid to ask a question because you're afraid of the answer that you might get. But Danny and I have been married for 63 years, and I still ask the questions because I don't know. I'm curious. I want to know answers. I care enough, I think, to want to know someone completely.
Very well said. Right? What is the goal here? It is to know and be known. What is the goal? It is to know God, if you will, in the Torah, right? To know what that is all about. But as much as it is to know, it is also to be known. And sometimes I'll just sort of, digress for a second. Sometimes we get more wrapped up in being known than our desire for knowing. That's called egotism. And then there's times when we use the desire of knowing as a defense mechanism, like we ask all the questions, but we're refusing to sort of be known. That's also potentially unhealthy. So it's about knowing and being known, that a question bridges the chasm between the two.
And truly caring. Interest.
Yeah. To me, that seems like a pretty good reason to read this book, Because if that is the purpose of the book with its story, then you will be able to understand how the story helps you to know and be known by this thing that your ancestors, our people, have come to define as God. The Yud He Vav He, that is God. Okay, hold on to that. Let's take it for a few minutes beyond the Torah. And now I want to explore for a few minutes how questions begin to take hold in the tradition. And I wanted to share with you a couple of the questions that I think are part of the tradition. So I'm going to start putting the text on the screen. And as we begin, I have a few quotes about questions that I grabbed. And I just want you to know, I'll say it in advance, that the quotes that I drew from are from scientists. So you have Neil deGrasse Tyson, who is like, one of the world's leading astrophysicists today. You have Albert Einstein, who was one of the world leading astrophysicists of history. And you have Voltaire, who was one of the ideological founders of this period in history that we are still influenced by, called the Enlightenment, which is all about asking questions and discovering, and the scientific method and the permission to have curiosity and interest in the world, and the opportunity, the technologies to enable us to do that. We might have called this a digital age. How did it get to be this moment? Because we were given permission, it was celebrated for us to try and discover more about the world. And the things that we have, they're just tools to help us do that. You know what? We're in a very complicated moment right now because we have so many amazing things, tools to help us know more stuff and know each other better. We can know about the life of people in Pakistan in an instant because of the technologies that we've created. That's amazing. And yet, without proper mediation, without the framing of the interest that we have in the knowledge that's available to us, it can be very almost catastrophic, destructive. And we're in a very tenuous place with all of that. So how do we move forward? Let's keep studying our text. And then the last one is Thomas Berger. He's a modern writer. I just liked it. So Barbara, why don't you read?
Should I read those?
The Art and Science, yeah.
Okay. The art and science of asking questions is the source of all knowledge. No one is dumb who is curious. The people who don't ask questions remain clueless throughout their lives. To raise new questions, new possibilities, to regard old problems from a new angle requires creative imagination and marks real advances in science. Judge a man by his questions rather than his answers.
Okay, great. Thank you. Right. So they're just fun little like frames for us to really take a look at what our questions all about. And these are from, some of the most thoughtful people that preceded us. So the idea that that nobody's dumb is curious is, first of all, like validating, right? It's the riff on there's no such thing as a bad question, which is almost true. There are bad questions, right? Like you could, but bad questions, if they're expressed with curiosity, they're not bad. They're bad questions if they're angry, Jay.
They're sarcastic or
Yeah, sarcastic, or if they're diminishing, if they're ridiculing, if they minimize, if they're questions that are used to impugn a person or to dehumanize them, absolutely, right? So there are such things as bad questions. But I think the point is, if you're curious, if you have interest, if you care, my language, if you care, then the questions aren't dumb. And the same thing, right, by what Voltaire says, and I think that this is important. And what I think this is important. It must have been great. We're having some chatter in my class over here. Look at this.
I said, why did you wear that? Right.
Or you're wearing
And then
that?
she got all upset.
Oh my goodness.
Then I was kidding. I was just joking.
So, of course. So this is the funnest class that we've had together in like ages. I can't wrangle you guys together to talk about this. I hope you like what I have to say. Yeah, and none of you have had any of the sugar yet.
Oh, yes, they have.
Oh, that explains everything. All right, so there isn't such thing a bad question. Then go to what Voltaire says, and I think it's beautiful. If you're going to make judgments, if you're going to make appraisals of people, make the appraisal on the kinds of questions that they ask. I just saw another, like, we had Chinese food for my kids' graduation, right? And she loved it, by the way. But you get fortune cookies, right? Which, by the way, the rest is like sort of kosher, but not really. We went to a vegan kosher place, which I think is kosher enough. However, on the fortune cookie bag, it has a certified kosher, right? So this is a very important thing to keep in mind, right? That like, if the OU will certify the fortune cookies, maybe they'll certify, oh, that's Barbara said, and therefore the prophecies are true.
What are the questions?
So in it says a smart man is the one who listens to the simplest of children, right? So like, right, like what's the mark of a person who is smart? Is the one who even listens to the curiosity of a child. It's the same thing. Why? So as much as a good question is an expression of interest, so too is the person who can make sense of the question that's being asked.
Mhm.
You know what that takes? Being a really good listener and being patient. So now let's move. Lori, will you read for us the text by Hillel? I'm going to put it up on the screen so that Suzanne can see it and others. Give me a second. All right, you see it? Hillel.
Hillel used to say, if I am not for myself, who is for me? But if I am for my own self, who am I? And if not now, when?
Great. It's actually kind of crucial that you read the second one as it's written. Try it again.
But if I am for my own self only, who am I? And
Not who, what? That's right. What am I? Yeah. And if not, now when? So we've seen this before, right? I mean, this is, but I want you to study it differently. First of all, this is, Hillel with Hillel's questions, right? And this is the quintessential bar mitzvah text. So we have a bunch of kids who are like, about to come into the world. They're emerging into adulthood. And this is the question that we ask them, right? This is the one that they're really moved by. Why are they moved by it so much? Why are these three questions something that a person who is entering into adulthood would want to ask? What are the questions that are being asked? Be a good listener and try to understand what is being asked by Hillel at this moment. Roberta P., you look like you want to try.
Well, I mean, you're asking teenagers, or children getting to be a teenager, and they are so egocentric that this kind of a question makes them realize that you can't only think about yourself. You have to think of others.
Why?
Because you are not the center of the universe.
Why? Do you listen to the sensitivity? I'm asking you to be if you don't want to be pushed, it's fine. I won't push you. I respect you. So, but like, why? Why are you not the center of the universe?
Because you're not.
Because you can't exist by yourself on an
Well,
island.
Yeah,
I guess you
because
could.
Fran, give me a shot. What does that mean? You cannot exist by yourself on an island. Have you seen people do it? They've done it before.
Not long. It don't last very long. Tom Hanks did okay.
Yeah, right. No, he didn't. He made a volleyball out of a face. He was like, Wilson. It's like one of the iconic screams. You can think of like all the things that people could scream out of like existential anxiety, right? And he says Wilson, and it's for a volleyball. Okay.
He needed somebody else. He needed something else.
So we are not, human beings are not solitary beings, ever. And if we think that we are because it's natural, especially when we're brought into the world where every single need of ours is attended to by someone else, that there is this moment when a child is emerging into adulthood, when they begin to, in fancy psychological terms, individuate, when they develop what's called, in Piaget's term, they develop abstract thinking, which means they're able to conceive of themselves in concept as opposed to in concrete tactile forms, like I'm hungry, I need to eat, versus I'm hungry, but that person is more hungry than me. I can hold out for a little while longer to give that person some food. And what does that do as a result? I help that person, and I have a conscience. I have a soul because I care about them more than I care about myself. Yeah.
It's like a child.
Parents and children. Sure. Yeah. All right. So now how about the second one? If I am for myself alone, or if I'm only for myself, what? That's why, Lori, I was like, what am I is so important. What's the difference? So ma. So the first one is me. Who am I, right? Who is locational. It's into your individual being. The second one says, if I'm for myself alone, what am I? So, I mean, kind of similar to what was said before, but different. Listen carefully. Why is it different? What's the difference between if I'm only for myself, who am I? Right? I'm not really myself, is what you would say. If I'm for myself alone, what am I? You could say I'm an egocentric, selfish, self-centered, blah, 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 bad person, right? But there's more to it. Fran, what do you think?
Am I part of something bigger? Am I part of something else?
Do I actually belong to something? How do you know that you actually belong to something? This is an important question to ask. How do you know you belong to something? Just think about it right now. How do you know you belong to something?
Other people care.
I care and others care.
Beautiful, lovely, right? And the pain of the moment is you pay membership for it, right? I mean, let's just be explicit and ugly about it. It sounds like money, but like, just think about that. I know that I'm a part of something because I pay to be a part of it. Now we talk about dollars and cents or Venmo, right? But what we're really saying is I'm giving of myself, and there's part of me in the collective that says I belong to it. That's one way. Then you had this other thing, which was beautiful. How do I know that I'm a part of something? Because other people have a claim on me, right?
And vice versa.
You put something into the middle so that you could be a part of other people as much as other people. This is the thing that I think we lose sometimes. But other people are doing the same thing. That means that they have a claim on you. That's a hard thing for us. We think like, well, I'll pay. I get what I want. Good enough for me. I got what I want. I assume that they're getting what they want. It's not my problem if they're not getting what they want. Until you realize that is an impossible way to think, ultimately. Yeah, Jay, what do you want to say?
It seems like we get this lesson every time we're in an airplane and they say, if you lose oxygen, the masks come down, put it on yourself first, take care of yourself, and then help the person next to you.
That's great, right? So like, if you can't take care of yourself, there's no way you can take care of other people. That would be the second. That's these two together. Very nice. Judy.
This whole thing sounds to me like the Musar concept of you have to take care of yourself so you can be of service to other people.
Sure, right? So like in Musar language, it's either like being deliberation or like making sure that you are not causing harm, so that whatever action you take is to be of service, right? It is kibush. It is the sublimation or the elimination of your own impulse so that you can embrace the goodness of another. That's really nice. Yeah. Any other comments? Jeannie, all right over there? Can I get a thumbs up? All right, good. All right. Pam, you okay? All right, good. Candy, you okay? All right, good. Is Lauren still on vacation? Is that the deal? Okay, that's what happened. All right, so thank you, Laurie. Alice, do you want to read the next one? This is also a world famous rabbinic thing, and I want us to study a little bit of it. Okay, so hold on just a second. Let me share the screen. This is also from Pirkei Avot, and we've probably seen this before. I admittedly and comfortably use this frequently when I have the opportunity to speak about good people in the moments when they pass, because the good people when they pass are wonderful reflection of this. Okay, all right, ready? Go for it, Alice.
He, Rabban Yohanan, said unto them, go forth and observe which is the right way to which a man should cleave. Rabbi Elazar said, a good eye. Rabbi Joshua said, a good companion. Rabbi Yosef said, a good neighbor. Rabbi Shimon said, foresight. Rabbi Elazar said, a good heart. He, Rabban Yohanan, said to them, I prefer the words of Elazar ben Arak, for in his words, your words are included.
All right, pause there for a second, right? So do you get it? First of all, the rabbi asks a question, okay? And here are the responses, okay? And they all go out in the world and they're like, oh, this is the most important thing you need to know. That's the most important thing you need to know. And the last one comes in and says a good heart, okay? Which, by the way, in ancient Israel, they believed the heart was the center of the intellect, because they didn't quite understand that the brain had that. They knew about the brain, but they didn't understand how important the brain was in the function of emotional intelligence, of intellectual intelligence. So when you hear heart, you also need to hear mind, okay? And just think about it now. Do we actually think that the heart is responsible for any of the kind of like thinking that we do? I mean, we use our heart to say like, oh, he's got a bad heart, or he's got a good heart, or like, such a good-hearted, good-natured person, right? How do we get to that, right? So we get to like what Linda says, it's a neshama. Well, the same thing. Where's the neshama in the body? It's probably in your brain, right? But, I mean, that's the only place that we could make sense of it. But you feel it here, which is interesting. I wonder, and the problem with the biology of this is that the brain has no nerve endings. So you can't feel anything in your brain. Although if you've ever said like, my brain feels heavy, right? What does it mean when your brain feels heavy? Yeah, or you have a headache, right? It's all the stuff on the outside, right? It's not on the inside. It's interesting kind of stuff. But so here's what Rabbi says, go out into the world and see what's the most important, and a good heart. Go ahead, Alice, and finish it up.
He, Rabban Yohanan, said unto them, go forth and observe which is the evil way which a man should shun. Rabbi Elazar said, an evil eye. Rabbi Joshua said, an evil companion. Rabbi Yosef said, an evil neighbor. Rabbi Shimon said, one who borrows and does not repay, for he that borrows from man is as one who borrows from God. Blessed be he. As it is said, the wicked borrow and do not repay, but the righteous deal graciously and give. Rabbi Elazar said, an evil heart. He, Rabbi Yohanan, said to them, I prefer the words of Elazar ben Arak, for in his words, your words are included.
Very nice. Thank you very much. Okay, so what's wrong?
What are the words of?
Elazar ben Arak, an evil heart. Right. It's a little it's a little poetic, right? So right. So the poetry of it is, right, Elazar ben Arak said the most important thing is to have a good heart, and the least important thing, or the thing to shun, is an evil heart.
Is he very well known?
Oh.
Elazar ben Arak? Yes.
I see.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Sherry asked, is he well known? Can I all just like encourage you to look at Suzanne's screen, because it's the happiest thing that I think we could all see. Suzanne's gigantic balls of yarn. Right? I love it. I love it, because I know that means that you're making a blanket. Yeah, or whatever you do.
Oh, so Rabbi Elazar said a good heart, which
But
encompasses.
did you
all
want to
of
say
the
something?
other things.
Wait,
That's
Suzanne
what
wants to
he
say
said.
something.
Okay, got it. I honestly.
This is for my grandson's significant other.
Oh, very nice. How about that?
Yeah.
What a lucky other. It's for the grandson's significant other. All right. So so first of all, the reason why I brought these is first of all, both the Hillel and the Rabbi Yochanan text is because they're questions. Okay, this is what happens to questions. Now we just spent 9 weeks studying questions in the Torah and learning about the complexities and depth. And aren't you glad that I didn't give you a final exam because you'd all. However, I'm looking at everybody on the screen. Aren't you glad that I didn't give you an exam? Okay. However, it's not like after the Bible is finished telling its story that questions are stop evolving. On the contrary, questions keep coming, right? So that's sort of the interest, right? And also the way the rabbis began to pose questions, the rabbinic texts. So the next book is not all of the questions in the Talmud, because that would be just simply too much, but because they use it as the primary form of communication question, okay? And a lot of it is about information answering. Why is this? Why is that? Because of this and because of that. However, these questions are not merely about information. What's the difference between just answering information and the ones that I think we were talking about in the Torah, which are actually questions of faith, right? They're foundational questions of faith. This isn't necessarily about a question of faith, is it? I mean, how would you categorize these questions, the ones that we've just read? They're not questions of faith. So what are they trying to accomplish by asking them?
How to live a good life.
They're
How to be righteous, how to be a moral, ethical person.
All right. So so these are questions that are educational. They're educative, right? They're questions to form a sense of moral being, a moral compass, if you will. They're the magnetism of the moral compass. So that, not that the questions from the Torah aren't those, but they had a different purpose. Their purpose of the questions is to shape a moral compass. Okay. How is that an important, why couldn't, by asking the question, why couldn't you just say, to live a good life, you need to not be worried about yourself and worried about others. To live, to be the best kind of person that you can be, you need to have a good heart, right? Why didn't they just give that as a prescription as opposed to asking a question? How is it different by framing it as a question? It makes you think. What is it? What is it that you're thinking about?
Your own understanding. Somebody just told you you have to have a good heart.
What's thinking mean? You're absolutely right. What is the thing that you are describing that you use the word think to describe?
Going over and
Understanding. Trying to make sense of.
Makes sense. There's work. There's something that's happening. There's effort. So when somebody tells you something, which is interesting because I've just spent 9 weeks telling you a whole bunch of stuff, and you've been very kind to listen to all the things that I've been telling you. But I think the value of the learning has always been in the moments in which you are prompted to think on your own. And what does that mean? It means that you actually have to partake in the process of learning. I cannot tell you the answers unless you discover the answers on your own. Hillel is not teaching you how to live a good life on his own. He knows. He already knows. These are like the best rhetorical questions.
Or in medicine, it's see one, do one, teach one.
In medicine, it's see one, do one, teach one, right? And that's how you figure out. And nobody gets to be a doctor unless.
That's funny. I would have done see one, teach one, do one.
But you can't teach unless you do.
Larry taught Andrew how to change the filter on the refrigerator water. So
Yeah.
now at home, we have one ready to be, so Andrew's gonna teach Matthew.
Yeah. There you go. I know. I have some gardening that needs to be done. Anybody good at gardening? All right, good. Any comments from the screen? Everybody's okay? So the reason that these are posed in the form of questions, the evolution of questions into the rabbinic tradition, is that it becomes a tool, a mechanism of thinking. You want to understand why the Jewish tradition is still so valuable, is because we have mastered the question as a tool to evoke thinking. The Talmud and the Talmudic process isn't about knowing. You can know all that stuff. Parenthetically, there are people who are masters of Talmud. They're called Eluim. They're people that if you put a pin drop, they call them pin drop Talmud people. You put a pin drop in any page of the Talmud and you say, what does it say on this page in this word? They look at the word and they can tell you the entire argument. Why? Because their brains were that photogenic that they could master the very complex argumentation that was happening on that very single page. There are people that can do this. No, everybody could be a Talmud scholar, but everybody doesn't have the.
They go here.
Right.
They see that word
And it opens up the whole thing.
I mean, I know this is all Talmud, but can we do a class like mini Talmud?
We'll get there. The idea that what the Talmud does, and actually it forms, is the question as a tool of communication, not to provide answers, but to provide the process of thinking, is another great innovation of the Jewish project. It's almost like it's like the operating system. It's like Mac iOS 15.5 or whatever it is, right? Like it's the stuff is happening behind, but that you never see, because it has been evolving for thousands of years. You are a part of that train of tradition. You are sitting at this table precisely now because you know that you need good questions to help you think, to make sense of the world. If you don't know the operating system, what are you? You're a robot, right? Well, welcome to, no, actually, it's the scary thing of the moment. What is artificial intelligence? Artificial intelligence is its capacity to learn its own operating system and to adjust it and to make changes to it. And it's very scary. It's really cool. It's really cool if it figures it out. It's very scary because once it figures out how to create the system, it could create a better system. Terminator, Matrix, yes, right? All of the dystopian futures are built upon that idea. All right, everybody doing okay? Let's go to the next page. All right, Sherry, will you read the next one? It's on page 2. Did you guys notice that I put page numbers for you today? Finally! Yay! I want a round of applause.
Which class it is in the session.
Oh yeah, I didn't do that. Oh, okay. I usually do. I don't do it on the paper, but it's on the document. The document is titled the session, so that's okay. But that's good. But it's not on the paper. Yeah.
This sort of has something to do with what we're talking about. My husband teaches at UCLA every once in a while, medical students, and they used to have a whole program called question-based learning.
Yes.
Okay. And he would go in, he would be the teacher, and he would present the material, and the kids, the medical students, had to come up with questions and try to figure out stuff. They could not do it.
Really?
They were so used to going to their phones or computers and getting the answers.
Ah, what a beautiful point. So, and obviously, what did your husband have to do?
Now stopped question-based learning.
Oh, really? Oh, that's interesting. Because I was gonna say,
the kids could not. It was like a waste of time. They couldn't do it.
that is such a fascinating.
Questions to ask to get the information from your
Right,
patients.
that's part of the problem.
Similar
is
in
that
law.
They
You
didn't
have to
know.
know questions. You have to like
They
think of
didn't
the
know the
questions to ask to
information.
elicit the information.
They couldn't do it. It was like.
Oh my God, that's scary.
What's not scary is that a car mechanic doesn't have to ask a lot of questions because the parts are parts. But if you're going to be a mechanic that's going to know how a car drives, you have to ask the right questions.
Yeah.
Okay. So the medical profession has various levels, right? Being a body mechanic is one level of being a medical professional. And the truth is that the field has evolved such that, and you agree with what I'm saying, right? So because nurses have the level of knowledge about how to be body mechanics as well as, if not better than, doctors, people with doctors. What should distinguish, and that's kind of the question of the moment, what should distinguish a doctor from a physician's assistant or or a nurse, right? And I don't mean it negatively, right? Is the thing that Roberta is trying to say. The problem that we face with questions in general, why I think this book is so vital, is because we have to learn how to ask the questions. If you don't know why you're doing what you're doing, then all we're doing is just, body mechanics, right? Well, we're one step away from just simply going through, a car wash, a body car wash, and getting ourselves, all spiffy.
I'll say the second best class I ever took was symbolic logic in philosophy.
Yeah.
Where they teach you how to.
Yeah, you got to figure out how to think. Wonderful. Any comments on the screen? Suzanne? No. Unfortunately, you're gonna have to do something with the mute or turn it up. Try it. I think because you plugged in, we can't hear you. No, can't hear you yet. Sorry, oh, try it now.
The lady left.
Yes, that's it. You're good.
Okay. You see it all the time in the medical shows on television. There are the doctors who look and say and ask the standard questions. Then there's the one who instinctively finds a different way to look at it.
That's so true.
Right? And the thing that we're entertained by is the person who sees it differently, right?
Yeah.
And what it's the what was the Peter Falk show? Columbo, right? Like he was like, right? Like it was all about the thinking, right? Or like I'm going to the old ones, right? What was the guy? The lawyer, Matlock, right? and I'm talking about, like, you guys are too old. You guys are too young for Matlock, even. So,
You're too young.
no, I know I'm too young for Matlock. You guys are too. I know about Matlock. I know about it, but I'm saying you were too young to watch Matlock.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I don't think so.
I'm still recording this. Okay. All right. So let's see. Sherry, will you read the next text? Hold on, let me put it back up on the screen, and then we'll get there. All right, go ahead.
Until what age in life is one obliged to study the Torah, even until the day of one's demise, for it is said, unless they depart from my heart all the days of my life. As long as one will not occupy himself with study, he forgets what he did study.
So doesn't that sound like that sounds like what we're doing here, right? I gave you guys homework and you didn't. All right.
That's
So
the problem. I'm not doing it the other 6 days.
yeah. But it's like exercise, right? I totally, if I don't do another thing, I exercise at least once a week and I'm like committed to it. If I don't do it otherwise, I'm like, well, at least I did it one day a week, right? So so first of all, it's a question. Okay. At what age is one obligated to study the Torah? Could have just simply gone the other way. Study the Torah all the days of your life. Why do you think it's framed as a question? So so it's based on that sort of thinking. Okay. This is, by the way, coming from most of Maimonides. So this is 1,000 years after what the rabbis were writing in Pirkei Avot. We've jumped historically 1,000 years. And so what he did was he was a great compiler of all the rabbinic tradition, the 1,000 years of thinking that had happened up until this point. And he is still using questions. So I want to point out that even though questions from the rabbinic tradition prompted people to think, that even after you had that period of history conclude, because the Talmud stops being written, And Moses Maimonides is the great, what do you call it, like editor. He's the great condenser of all of the rabbinic tradition. And when he does it, he's still asking questions, but there's a little bit of a nuance here. What's going on? He's doing something.
He's also reminding you.
There's a
this is what you have
reminder.
to do.
There's a reminder in it, and it's also a little bit more factual. Look at what the answer is.
Till you die.
Right? Till you die. Right? You could have just said till 75, but boy, what is that? That would have sparked the whole argument.
Right.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. The Talmud is all about the argument. There are fewer answers in the Talmud than there are really good questions and debate. There are a lot of arguments that just fall off because the celebration of the debate is what the Talmud captures and records. Here is Moses Maimonides, who began slowly to condense it to us to say, no, there are things that we need to do. Because if Moses Maimonides, said to you, you should study until you're 75 and then go to retirement in Florida, right? Which, by the way, a lot of people think more than you would realize. If you go talk to people in the desert or in Florida and you say like, well, how come you don't go to shul anymore? Or how come you're not like, learning? Or how come you're not like participating in life anymore? You know what they'll say? I mean, more than that, we did it already. We've done it, right?
That's my parents' answer.
We're done. We're
My
done.
grandmother was a training for a second bar mitzvah at 83.
But
That's-
you're never done studying.
That's fair.
You're never done. Well, yes. And Suzanne, now we have Suzanne. I still have the screen on because I just want to keep it going for a moment, right? And we're going to go on the next text. Is that Suzanne's got it right. You still study. So look at what he says, right? It's an all the days of your life kind of thing. Now, one is that's a clarification. Two, there's a moralistic point of view into that. If you're always studying all the days of your life, look at what it says, right? If you don't study, you forget. And if you forget, then you lose your place in the world. Okay. All right. Audrey, you want to read?
With regard to the same verse, Rava said, after departing from this world, when a person is brought to judgment for the life he lived in this world, they say to him, the order of that verse, did you conduct business faithfully? Did you designate times for Torah study? Did you engage in procreation? Did you await salvation? Did you engage in dialects of wisdom or understand one matter from another? And nevertheless, beyond all these, if the fear of the Lord is his treasure, yes, he is worthy. If not, no, none of these accomplishments have any value. There is a parable that illustrates this. A person who is said to be his emissary, bring a measure of wheat up to the attic for me to store there. The messenger went and brought it for him. He said to the emissary, did you mix
some of this stuff?
Okay. Did you mix a cob of preservative to keep away the worms into it for me? He said to him, no. He said to him, if so, it would have been preferable had you not brought it up. For what use is worm-infested wheat? Right? Likewise, Torah and mitzvot without the fear of God have no value.
Okay, wow. All right, so do you get it? Right, so all of a sudden it comes back with a big, huge, like clobber on the side of the head. So probably some of you have seen this before. So this is one of those like great sort of, iconic rabbinic teachings that says like when you die, right? First of all, when you go to the place wherever you go after you die, they're going to ask you some questions. Right? That's a very Jewish thing, right? It's not like you get there and be like, I mean,
no peace.
It's no peace. Isn't there a place where you're totally known? Not yet.
I love this. I remember learning this, and I remember thinking that if how you conduct your business is the first question that they ask you.
Yeah.
That so for me sums up how a person lives their life. Right. Whether it's ethical or not.
Okay.
And so how your business world ethically, even before your personal life, because if you live your business life ethically, most likely I would assume, maybe I'm taking a big assumption here, that you're living your personal life ethically as well. And I remember thinking, what a great first question.
So let's play with it for a minute. Okay, so the first question is, were you an ethical person? What's the second question?
Did you study?
Study.
What is that? What, like, it, put it in that concept, right? Did you learn, right? Did you grow?
Right.
Okay, third one.
Did you have
What's that?
Did you have kids?
So did you have kids? It could be physical, but let's like put it out of physical and say, what is procreation? Right? Let's use it metaphorically.
Okay.
So what's
Did you
procreate?
spread the word of God?
Did
to others?
you take what you know and put it somewhere so that it could take on a life of its own, right? That's what procreation is. Independence, right?
Yeah.
Independence. Okay. So if you will, did you teach? Okay. And then the last one, did you await salvation? What's that? Do you guys know what it means to await salvation? Let's keep it simple. Yeah. Well, you could get to the Mashiach. Did you have hope? Right? Did you have hope? Or were you a hopeful person? Okay. And then the last one, did you engage in the dialectics of wisdom or understand one matter from another? Right? It's a little complicated, but what's it mean? Right? Did you make distinctions? Did you make discernment? So it's one thing to have knowledge. It's another thing to become wise. What's the definition of wisdom? We did this. You guys remember last class? Walking with wisdom. Wisdom isn't about knowledge. Wisdom is about the application of knowledge to understand how you find purpose and meaning in your life. Okay. And moreover, how you share it. So, and then the last one. Well, so what's fear of the Lord, right? I mean, well, then let's put it in words that sounds better. So, do you have a sense of awe? Do you have a sense of wonder? Do you see the world as bigger than you? That's what I think it means. And it's fear is it's awe. The word, the translation is poor. Are you in awe of the fact that you don't know everything? So let's just put that into a list, right? Were you an ethical person? Did you learn? Did you share, teach with others? Did you have hope? Did you have wisdom about, like, which also includes having hope, which is not realized, right? Dashed hopes, despair. Did you grapple with despair? You could say that too, okay? Did you overcome despair? Because having hope without suffering is Pollyannish, right? But having hope after despair is actually pretty empowering. It's what we would call wisdom. Yeah. And then finally, right? Did you have awe? Okay. So when you die, these are the questions you ask. Now, what's the implication of the when you die? Was Rava sitting up in the heaven? Did he know this? Did he's like, I went up there last week. Like I was just driving up on Mulholland Drive because, you know, I'm twisted around and I was waiting at the light and boom, there it was. No, he didn't die. So what were the rabbis imagining? Right? The rabbis were imagining what would it be like. Why? Because this is what it means to live a good life. Yeah? Are you guys with me? This is what it means to live a good life. So if you want to know what's the recipe for a good life, well, it starts with these things. And if you can master these things in some way, it'd be pretty darn good. By and large, if you walk the world with these things in mind, you would probably find fulfillment and satisfaction, and B, if there was something to discover along the way that you had not yet known or may also bring goodness to your life, you'll be more receptive to it. How many times do we miss good things because we're so busy, right? This is the antidote to that. Okay. All right. Any comments on screen? You guys okay? So far, so good. All right, let's take a quick break now. Everybody's good. We're gonna take a little quick break and we'll come back. I hope I can wrangle the group over here. Welcome back, everybody. Alice. We love Alice. I think she had to jump up early for a test.
Okay, we'll share that after it's being recorded.
Made me more
Always.
curious.
I know, I don't have it in
And
like 4
she
years.
said, when each baby's
Still have to get.
Oh, okay, great. You know what? Believe it or not, I have to know these things.
No.
I have a teenage daughter who could really use it.
Yeah.
No, I feel for her. What's that? I feel for her. Really?
Yeah, very compassionate.
October
You
what?
know what?
With the.
My daughter, my wife is amazing. And I think like, I don't know if you guys had this, for those of you that had daughters, but it's like, boom. You know, they're just like, it's just awful. You're like, cause like mama's like, I'd rather this. And the kid is like, I don't care what you think I'm gonna do. I'm not gonna do it. So I get to play the compassionate one. Yeah, we have a variety of roles. Okay, welcome back, everybody. All right, so we're gonna spend the last few moments just going through the concluding pages of the book that I wrote, which is kind of hopefully a summary, just a snapshot of what the holiness of doubt really means, what I hope that it has meant after our study. And then we'll just have some concluding moments and then we'll wrap up. So it's about 12, it's about 8 after, so we may have a few more minutes just to conclude. But why don't we read, Linda, do you want to read a little bit of the beginning parts of the concluding chapter of the Holiness of Doubt book, which I really hope I hear from somebody to tell me that it's going to be going into print soon.
Good.
I hope. Everybody should have that kind of hope too.
Are you going on Amazon?
Someday.
I have a book signing for you.
There you go.
There you go.
Okay.
When thinking of faith, we have the impulse to conjure the value of warriors and piety of religious leaders as manifestations of absolute confidence. Yet the courage of a military general or the inspiration of a priest is momentary, even ephemeral. The beauty of our humanity is to capture glimpses of faith throughout our lives, moments which inspire us to continually pursue divine encounters, all the while knowing that the times we do not feel inspired or confident aren't punishments or lapses of good judgment. Rather, the ability to seek deeper understanding and truth from that which does not seem clear or certain is precisely the faithful path.
So you've heard me say it before. In fact, I even kind of alluded to it a little bit along the way here, that faith is today in this class, that we would think that faith is some kind of standard, that somehow, we have to reach some plateau, and the plateau is where we're qualified to be people of faith. And if we don't appreciate, we don't reach that means that either we're, atheists or agnostic or bad Jews, or we're, all the things that don't, that are the negative of that approximation. And that's very detrimental. A lot of people get hung up on that. Rather, faith is this, especially through the questions as we discover, it's an invitation to something deeper, and it can only be accomplished by a question. You can't simply have a deeper connection without a question to evoke that. And the idea that we have the ability to do that through questions is, at least according to what the Bible is trying to teach us, a definition of faith. In a way, it's kind of radical, because we would have assumed that faith means that you read the book and this is how it happened, and okay, fine, I can interpret it a little bit creatively, but basically I've got to believe it the way that it is, because that's how it's meant to be. On the contrary, if you remember from the very beginnings of this class, we already discovered that the understanding of the Torah on the surface is only complete when you study the deeper levels that exist between the verses. And those who only read the text as absolute truth are missing the real communication that is coming through. And the fact that Judaism is still relevant, given based on that permission, is really, it's actually something that we need to celebrate as a definition of faith. I think it helps us. I think it helps us tremendously, because we feel like we want to do the right thing. We want to accomplish the goal. We want to succeed. And we think that faith is something to succeed. That's not necessarily what's being said here. Go ahead and do one more paragraph.
Even if we do not define ourselves as religious people or believers in any one faith system, we can all identify moments when we sense clarity or certainty in our purpose. Moments like these often appear from expressions of wonder or curiosity, or in the confirmations of a hypothesis. But if the Torah teaches us anything about faith, it is that all experiences of certainty are rarely enduring. The patchwork of tales and encounters with divinity throughout the book are intended to be snapshots of a faithful life. The book affirms that none of our spiritual founders experienced total certainty. In truth, it is the questions of the Torah that reveal evolution of our ancestors' faith. We even discover an understanding of the faith God places in humanity to inspire our own faithful devotion through the questions recorded in the text.
All right, so pause right there. Thank you very much. So, in other words, it is, if the goal is certainty, which is a good goal, right? Because we want to know. We need to know stuff. I mean, if we didn't know gravity, first of all, imagine the world without knowing that there was such a thing as gravity. It just happened, right? But the desire to know that, coincidentally, also sort of a product of this evolution in thinking through the Enlightenment. Sir Isaac Newton was one of the preeminent founders of what is known as the Enlightenment period, because he simply said, "Oh, an apple fall from the tree. How did that happen?" Well, sure enough, he discovered this whole unbelievable system of the way the world works that is incontrovertible. Now, just because Isaac Newton figured that out hundreds of years ago, does that mean that that's the end of knowledge? No, because with that created a whole evolution of thinking to prompt ultimately an Albert Einstein to come along and to figure out that, no, wait a minute, there's a relative experience of the way the world works, that how I stand and experience it may be different than the way that Linda experiences it. Even though she and I are staring at each other in the face right now, we are in two entirely different places. And there is a theory, there's a way for us to figure out how the two of us are making sense of the world. That's what Albert Einstein brought to us, in short, okay? My poor, my physicist son, if he hears this, he's like, no, that's not how it works. But you get the point, right? That was a very simple term. The concept that we might think that that's the end of knowledge, but that's not the end of knowledge. That just enables us to learn more. So the whole process of faith isn't reaching some standard. It's the faith that there's still yet more to know. That's what this paragraph was really trying to get at. That's what the Bible teaches us. These questions aren't just simply to teach us to be like Abraham, or to be like Moses, or to be like Bnei Israel. God forbid that that's what we were being taught. Because if it was, look at all the flaws of Abraham. Look at all the weaknesses of Moses. Look at all of the complaining of the people. And look at the condemnation of the people for their behavior. If that's the end of the story, we're dead. We're dead. So it's not about that, but it's about understanding what were the questions that were helping those people and that group of people at that particular time to learn more. That's what prompts us to know more in our time today. Pause and comments, reactions. Jay.
The more I think about it, I think that even angry questions are holy, because what it isn't, it's not a statement, God doesn't exist. It's still a question, and the question yields discussion. Just like Rabbi, you gave me some answers and some other people did. So I still think even coming from that place, it's still a question. It's still
good job, Jay. Yay. That's right. Angry questions, if they're good questions, are good questions, right? Angry questions that are bad questions are dangerous. but I think you got it right, right? A good angry question can be a totally holy question. What's a bad angry question? What's that? Yeah. Are you really wearing that? Right, right, exactly.
Those are bad angry questions. Who do you think you are?
Who do you think you are? What gives you, who made you God? What gives you permission to talk to me that way?
My mother said a lot of these things to me.
And they're angry questions. It's amazing. I'm not saying we're perfect, right? And your mom's pretty awesome because she made a you, right? It's not that she was a bad person, but she asked bad questions.
But if you say, who do you think you are in a different tone, it's a completely different thing.
And we've discussed that before. Who do you think you are? Well, it's an invitation. Who do you think you are? Tell me, because I want to know. As opposed to, who do you think you are? I know who you are. Do you think you know who you think you are? Because I know who you are better than you do. Wait a minute, that doesn't sound like a question at all. It sounds like a bunch of angry spewing. I try not to be.
Parents can sometimes do that. to
Oh
children.
yeah. Oh my God. Oh, what is it? What is it that they're doing? They're demonstrating power and authority
And frustration.
and frustration. Yeah. All right. Wonderful. Jay, one more thing.
Yeah, I just think that a bad angry question is when you don't want the answer, when you
Yeah.
really think you know and you really just don't want to answer and explore. I think that's
Right. Right. At which point is it really a question? No, it's more like a declaration. Happens to be framed with a question mark. Let's see. Jeannie, you want to read? You don't have to.
I'm good.
All right.
What
Go ahead and
makes-
bring us home.
What makes doubt holy then isn't the audacious claim that uncertainty has some power to evoke divine attention.
So pause right there. Just I want to underscore it, right? What makes doubt holy isn't that by asking a question of God or getting God's attention by asking a question of doubt is what we're supposed to be doing. Okay? That's not what makes it holy. The holiness of doubt is not that you have doubt that is making God think twice. You get it? Or making God try to answer or resolve your doubt. That's not what it is. Please keep on reading. Pay attention. Maybe it'll be responded to.
God loves the answers, if not more than the questions. The holiness of doubt is found in the prism through which a resolution of uncertainty is refracted into a spectrum of interpretations and understanding.
This is Sherry's question with her family at Passover, when all of a sudden it sparked a great conversation. When everybody had something to contribute to it. When there was something to contribute to the question. Go on.
Good questions will always forge stronger bonds than didactic proclamations of truth. The book does indeed highlight the powerful moments when God commands and the people obey. The entirety of the Torah, however, intends to grapple with all that occurs before and after those moments of revelation. Indeed, one great treasure of Jewish wisdom throughout the generations is the honor and value placed on the question. Questions are the foundation of the most important storytelling recorded in the thousands of years of Jewish tradition. We have faith that all the questions and stories woven between them prepare us to receive certainty or truth when it is revealed. The holiness of doubt is a sacred process in which curiosity is celebrated, awareness grows, and relationships are sown. Ask good questions, the Torah teaches. The reward for a good question and even better answer is an encounter with holiness, even with the divine.
Thank you. Send a nice sentence, send it?
Yes.
Good. Okay. So there you have it. All right. So there you have it. So go ahead, Judy.
Trying to think of how to phrase this, but all of this just shows me how valuable it is to learn together, because you can ask questions, it's like learning in English class when you read a book and you learn so much more about the book that you study in the class than if you had read it by yourself. And I feel like that's what we're getting here.
What do you want to say, Audrey?
That everybody else's input and observations. is
Yeah.
like huge.
Very valuable.
I think we've become a family and we can ask and love each other and listen to everybody very, very closely. It's time and effort that we put into these years.
And trust.
Trust.
And trust. The goal is to know and be known. Right? To what do you belong? You belong to something, not because you pay a membership to it. Okay? Whether it's your time or it's dollars from your bank account, or it's, you know, some kind of like sacrifice that you make to the whole. That may be the transaction that enables the participation of belonging. Because belonging is about being known. And in order to be known, you have to know. And in the process of your acquisition of knowledge is the ability for others to see how you are known or to know you. You know somebody by the questions that they ask. You know somebody by when they ask you questions. It tells you what they're interested in, if they're good questions. So allow people to ask you good questions. That's hard sometimes, by the way.
Especially when you're with someone that talks all the time.
Yeah, you've got a lot of that, right? So, Judy, right? Judy's got it right. I'm not saying this is easy, but she's like, especially with one who talks all the time, or especially with people who are like, you know, who never ask good questions, right? Jeannie, what do you want to say?
I just want to put in another plug for not just asking questions, but truly listening to the answers and incorporating them into your thought process, into who you are. I have, and I'm sure we have all met people who ask a lot, but the next time you see them, they ask the same questions again. And I'm always taken by someone who will remember something that I've told them. I'm actually surprised because I think people really aren't actively listening most of the time. It's a real compliment. And when you remember something that someone has shared, especially if it's something personal, you really do feel like they were listening, they were paying attention, and they cared. It wasn't just hearing themselves speak.
Don't you love it when it's automatic to say, how are you? And somebody says, how are you? You say, oh, I don't feel that great. They don't hear it. And they say, oh, that's good.
I'm telling you, the people feel lonely. People feel lonely when people don't ask those kinds of questions.
Yeah.
I think that's, so how do you get, so there's a little bit of like, you know, therapy, curative here, by prompting people to ask good questions of you. One is that you have to be available to ask, but you have to be something worthy of curiosity. That's always hard. And talking with people who maybe have like transitioned out of long-term relationships, or even people who are like looking for long-term relationships. That's one of the great challenges that people find is like to be somebody worthy of love. I guess you could say it, right? And here, worthy of care, worthy of interest. Okay. But then the idea is that, you know, you have to be filled and imbued with enough sense of love to be curious about others. That's also a challenge too. So I want to go back just for a moment. And if you remember from the first class, I asked you, so what is a question? Okay. So question is, I wrote this down. A question, according to us, is something to understand what's unknown, right? To make something known that's unknown. It's a distinction between information and versus knowledge, right? That a question is somehow distinguishing between information and knowledge. It's a tool, a prompt, a vehicle. It also enables us, a question enables us to explore who is asking the question, you guys said. Questions are an opportunity for the expression of expertise, okay? Questions are a prompt for the other to create a relationship. Questions can also be used in power dynamics, right? That, like, somebody has the answer and they're demonstrating their power and authority over a person who doesn't have as much. And ultimately, you said relationship. So I feel like we've done that, and I feel like we've taken it even a little bit further. And I hope the next time somebody asks you what is a question, you'll say, "Oh, I took this whole class on it."
Better yet, here's the book.
Yeah.
And you
That-
can have
a
it for
shameless
10
plug,
minutes.
right? Exactly.
Yeah.
Go to Amazon in 1990. But the idea that it's actually a lot more complicated. I mean, if anything, that you're leaving this class feeling like what questions are is more complex, is a gift, and it's also a blessing, because it will hopefully inspire you to find within the world around you and within our world that where questions are being asked, you will be able to determine where those questions really do fit. And the more that you are able to respond to the questions in the way that they're being asked most authentically, the more satisfied and fulfilled you'll be.
Did you say something about Passover? About that when your Seder's over, when somebody asks a good question, like,
Oh, you've reached the Seder when somebody asks a good question? Yeah, I think that sounds like maybe.
Your Seder.
Oh, at my Seder?
Yeah.
That I know, like, the conversation is, yes, I know that the Seder has accomplished its goal when somebody's asked a good question. Yeah. I know that I've led a good Seder when I can do what you said your family has experienced. And I try very hard to figure out what that question is. And it's taken me a long time. I mean, my family will tell you, because I've done all kinds of experimentation on them on things. That's sort of the push and pull and the tug of my own journey. But now, I mean, asking a good question is like, it's like you got to look forward to it, right? Forward to it. Any other comments from the screen about where we're at and where we're going? Feeling
Aren't we
good?
finished?
We are finishing. We are finished with this class. Okay. So you are all invited to enjoy lunch and to continue schmoozing, because I believe that there's going to be some socializing going on. We can leave it on for a little while. Or maybe, because I know I'm going to have to go in a few minutes, we'll switch it over. But let me conclude and say thank you. Thank you for taking the learning journey with me. Thank you.